Hello, how are you? I'm Kimberly HayDay,
And hey, I'm Amanda Day,
and you are listening to the Fundraising HayDay podcast,
where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
and how we can all do, everybody, all of us together can do a better
All
job of
together.
changing the world. Yes, yes. Don't be putting it on just one person. That's not right. How we can all do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy.
And remember that our Patreon subscribers get these episodes early. So, um, with less federal funding happening this year, shorter deadlines between grant release, 2 weeks, hello, July was insane, and a whole lot of unknowns. Competition is stiffer than ever when it comes to grant funding. And so, just like you have a trusted mechanic when something goes wrong with your car, you really do need to make sure that your grants are high performing, just like you want your cars to be high performing, right? So, it's never a bad idea to have a trusted grant reviewer on your side, which is why Kimberly and I, through HayDay Services, offers the grant mechanics.
We are fine grant mechanics. I don't know a lot about cars, just to be clear. It's all about grants. We are
Grant
mechanics for
mechanics.
grants. We have the expertise that could help you go that extra mile. See what we did there. Get
All
you,
tuned up.
get you all set up where you need to be because man and I have been doing this for a long time. Together, we've got more than 55 years of raising more than $120 million in grants the hard way. I hit my goals the hard way through, and I say that because I wasn't writing 10, 12, $10 million federal grants, which would have gotten me there a lot sooner, to the fundraising that we've had through grant awards. It was through private foundations mainly and some government. So I'm just saying. It's a lot of grants. Amanda's written a lot of grants. We have also both served as and continue to serve as grant reviewers for federally funded programs, local, state, and county.
That
So it's something I love doing. But it's made me not only a better grant writer, but it's made me a better trainer to help people teach people the skills they need to write grants because we've just seen so many scenes. So if you are interested in that grant mechanics thing, that sounds good to me. Go to haydayservices.com and look for the grant mechanics page for more details. We've got some starting rates. We charge based on the complexity of the grant and the time required to do that and whether or not you want one or both of us to work on. So all that information is going to be there for you. It's haydayservices.com, HayDay services.com. I'm hitting my hands a lot today. So if you're listening in your car, no one is being harmed. It's just me just emphasizing my fist to palm. I don't know why. So HayDay Services, HayDay services.com. Look for the grants mechanics page and let us know if we can tune it up for you.
Absolutely. So today we're going to share how to put together your grant management team within your organization, and we'll be back to talk with about that with you after a quick word from our sponsor.
We are thrilled that S&F Writing Solutions is our podcast sponsor for the second half of season 8. Also, season 8, what? Wow. So founder and CEO Stacy Fitzsimmons holds a Master's of Business Administration where her thesis focused on strategic planning and culture change. Combined with her 20 plus years of experience as a project management and grant professional, with a federal grant win rate of 70%, she has learned more than a thing or two about leadership, consulting, and taking calculated risks. So take a listen. So Stacy, in a follow-up to our last little mini interview episode in the pod, what steps can leaders take to set the culture within an organization? So we talked last time about mistakes were made or mistakes might be made, but how can leaders take steps to set the culture so that maybe those mistakes aren't as easy to fall into in an organization?
Well, the first thing is actually the hardest, and it's looking at ourselves.
Mm.
And we have to kind of look in that leadership mirror and say, where am I at as a leader? What is my leadership level? And where can I take this organization? And that is the hardest thing to do. But it's the most important. And this goes back to one of the concepts in John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and that's the law of the lid. If my level of leadership is here, this is as high as the leadership of my organization will go. So if I'm only a level 5 leader, how do I get to be a level 8 leader so that my organization can also rise with me? So that is really looking at yourself as a leader and what do you need and where can you help your organization? Because the culture of the organization rises and falls with the leadership. I think the second one is really strategizing and looking not just to the standard executives that you might look at for strategizing, but really dig deep into the boots on the ground. When you have people that are actually working with the clients that you serve, those are the people that know what is needed. So you really need to elevate them up. And when you start elevating those people that are doing the work to help strategize and help formulate the plans, then the whole culture rises with that. People feel valued. People feel like they're important. And who doesn't want to feel valued and important, right? So let's make sure that people are feeling valued and important. And I think the third thing I would recommend is really not just getting the input from your staff, but really empowering them. Empower them to actually do their job, right?
Mhm.
Um, give them the tools they need, but also give them the freedom to do their job and to do it well. And if you have people that aren't performing, really have conversations with them about the whys. It could be something very simple. But if they're not empowered to do their job, then you're going to have a reverse effect. And those people are going to feel defeated. And that goes back to number two. So
Mhm.
we all want to feel valued. We all want to feel empowered. And when you empower people to do their job, typically they will rise to meet your expectations.
It sounds like a lot about trusting and
Oh,
yeah,
trust,
coming
vulnerability,
through that.
trust.
Yeah.
Two words that you have to have in your dialogue if you're gonna have a culture shift. Vulnerability is probably number one in your vocabulary, even though it is the hardest thing to do.
Mhm.
Very true. Thank you.
Mhm.
To find out more about Stacy Fitzsimmons, SNF Writing Solutions, and her incredible offerings, visit snfwritingsolutions.com. So, Kimberly and I are currently in the middle of a year-long grant management training that is hosted by the Grant Professionals Association that is centered specifically on grant management. And of course, we're talking a lot about federal grant management because the rules and the rules and the rules, right? And one of the things we've noticed out of all, there's about 100 people in this class, is that the grant professionals who don't have the support of their organization are having a harder time successfully managing their grants, or whether it's a large foundation or any sort of governmental grant, because they're having to go it all by themselves, which is a lot.
Also, with all the information that's requested, it's usually not something, unless you are in a small organization where you can access everything, it's usually not even possible. So just like we always preach about, grant writing is not a solo sport, grant management is not a solo sport. And I argue that grant management actually starts when you are writing the grant. So
Yes.
what we want to do is talk about the important aspects of not only grant management, but really focusing on what kind of framework do you need in place? What kind of understandings and roles and responsibilities should be assigned across your organization? Because it needs to be across your organization.
Yep. So first of all, when you're thinking about, let's say you don't have a grant management team, but you're thinking, you know what, this is a good idea. I need to put one together. And you may be the only person with grant in your title, which Kimberly and I have both worked in places where we are the only one with that role. So you're going to have to look outside the grant yourself person and figure out who's going to be it. And let's first talk about the financial management aspect of grant management, right? So first of all, when you get a grant, you have a certain amount of time to spend that money. And I learned the lesson the hard way, thinking everybody's going to be so excited we got the grant, they're going to spend the money. I don't need to worry about that. But I quickly learned you actually have to tap gently and then sometimes shake people and say, hey, you've got this grant. You have 6 months and you left and you haven't spent even half of it yet. What's going on? Spend your money. So part of your job as a grant manager is not only figuring out who's spending the money, but working with them to make sure that they are spending that money in a timely manner. And again, figuring out who is the one spending it. Every place I've worked, I've always encouraged the program directors because they know what they need. They know how to work their program. Can I, as the grant manager, go and buy stuff? Sure. But really, I don't know is the exact type of equipment they need. Like I used to tell my police officers, I'm like, do you really want me to go pick out your bulletproof vests? I'll do it, but they're going to be pink and sparkly. And that usually got them to go, you know what? No, we think we can handle it ourselves, right? So sometimes saying things like that helps. Another thing is making sure that expenses that are charged to your budget, to the grant budget, the grant account, are actually legit, right? Like that it is a true grant expense, that you followed your organization's procurement policy, that there's still money left in that particular line item on your grant budget. Somebody needs to be overseeing that. And it can be the grant manager, but it all, people from finance are good at stuff. That's what they do all day long. So why not have them help with the grant aspect of that, right? And then any additional approvals that might be needed when it comes to grant budgets. Sometimes funders will say, hey, here's your approved budget, but before you spend this line item, you need to give us X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it's they want to see a copy of a contract before you sign it with whoever you've hired. Sometimes it's for travel. They want to make sure that you aren't buying a first class ticket or booking a hotel that costs, 3 times as much as a governmental rate should be, right? So just know that there's going to be some extra steps that somebody has to do. Then any other paperwork, right? You've got to show to your funder you spent the money the right way. So someone's got to be collecting invoices and maybe checks or cleared checks or wire transfer proof, all that sort of thing. And it's usually has to be delivered to the funder, whether it's uploading online or I don't know if people are still mailing things. Sometimes that happens. You've also got to document employees that are either paid by the grant or you're using an employee's salary as the cost share or the match of that grant. So someone has to be documenting that. Did the funder pay you, right? Is it a grant where they paid you up front? Did that check actually show up? Or if it's a reimbursement basis, are they paying you every month? Then if you've got to do a budget amendment, there's paperwork for that. So when it comes to the financial aspect of a grant, there's a lot of moving parts, and it doesn't have to be you as the grant person alone doing it. I often involved finance and my program directors to help make sure that everything was done seamlessly. I certainly did a lot of oversight and answered a lot of
Yes.
questions, but I wasn't typically the one spending the money, and I wasn't typically the one creating all. Now, I might be the one collecting all the final paperwork to submit to the funder, but I wasn't necessarily the one, I'm not creating checks. I'm not signing checks. That was not my role as a grants administrator. And before you go, but I'm the executive director and I do all that. That's fine, right? There really is no wrong or right way as to who has to do all these roles, but we're just saying somebody has to do them and no one person can really do all of it. You need a team of people to help, whether it's one other person or maybe it's 10 other people, depending on the size of your organization. So financial is one of the aspects you need to think about.
And the same strategic thinking, critical thinking applies when you're looking at who's responsible for the programmatic side. So Amanda did a great job, as always, fleshing out all the different pieces of the financial grant management. And rightfully so, there's usually a huge emphasis on the financial part, right? But I always come back to, but you got to make sure you're doing the things that you said you were doing. And if it's not happening the way you planned, you need to be able to explain that and maybe do a course correction and then report on things programmatically, gather the lessons learned, quantitative outcomes, qualitative outcomes, maybe some success stories, all of those things, and run the program. So I would just respectfully suggest that if you are a grant writer for a small organization, they're like, well, you have grant writer in your title, so you got a grant, so you can run that program. Only if they're okay with you not writing more grants, right?
Right? Because I don't have time because I'm running a program, right?
And I know for a lot of local government agencies and smaller agencies, people are wearing multiple hats, and I respect that. And it could be that you, as the program director, are going to be really the one monitoring those outcomes. And you probably might have even written the grant. I'm going to hope and pray that you have great staff that you trust and respect and support that can run the program, because it's just a challenging thing to do all of those things on your own. So things like, carrying out all the activities in the program description of the grant, or the outcomes that were agreed upon in the grant agreement. If you had certain eligibility screenings and things, you need to make sure those are happening, so you're serving the people that you said you're going to serve, that those people are eligible for those services. Tracking objectives and outcomes, as I said, evaluation, looking at your summative data, seeing what's going on, seeing what's happening. For larger grants, multi-year grants, you're not going to just be doing that at the very end. It's ongoing. And if no one is doing that and the program goes off the rails, you're not going to know. If you're not checking in, you're not going to know what happened or why. If it's a larger grant and subawards, there's the financial aspect. If you're subawarding, if you have subrecipients. But then there's also the programmatic part. Yeah, they need to get their money to do their things, but are they doing those things? How do you know? So could also be collaborating with community partners in the way you said you were going to be doing. Also, if the program does go off the rails, if enrollment is way down, or if demand is so much higher because maybe there was a disaster of some kind. I mean, I don't want to call that into being, but we have a lot of weather disasters, right? Mm-hmm. Fire, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. They can all either create demand for human service programming or prevent enrollment and ongoing programs because people's lives are so disrupted. You'll need to someone is going to need to contact the funder and sort of let them know what's going on and see how things can change. And finally, I shouldn't have left this till last, because for me, it's like the number one. It's number one. If this is a grant to hire people, by golly, they're never going to be hired on time. They are not going to be hired on time. I'm just smacking on my desk today. They are. If you're hearing thumps, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and not do that. Hiring. Always, it is like if you have ever had a room fixed, or whether it's your house, your apartment, your RV, your car, whatever, it always takes longer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
To find, and hiring is no exception. In fact, I think hiring leads the pack. If you are if you're writing the grant, I know we're talking about grant management, but remember what I said, grant management they need to already be talking to each other, grant management and grant writing, when you're writing that grant, when you're planning the grant. Please don't let anybody tell you, oh yeah, once we receive the funding, I'll be able to hire that person within a month and get them trained. No, just tell them that I said no. Tell them, prove me wrong. Get out there and prove me wrong, because I want to be wrong. But it just never goes. It never happens. Have you ever had it where someone actually was hired early, Amanda, and it was a good fit and there were no issues and they were I've never seen it. I have never seen it. And the more than 4 or 5 years I've been on this planet doing this work, hiring. Someone's got to be riding that process, because sometimes what can happen is the program person is running the program and maybe they don't have time. I mean, hiring takes a lot of time. So many things can come up. But again, that's a function. There needs to be oversight in that function. If you're the grant manager, maybe you're not interviewing people or writing job descriptions, but you just need to make sure that if it's not happening in a timely fashion, there's a plan to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'd say in the same vein of hiring people, if you have you've got to hire like a contractor to do something, I've done so many grants where it's like for road construction. So the whole grant is we need to hire a construction company to come and actually build the physical road. So we can do nothing until we have them hired, right? And so those are, it's like hiring, but except you've got to have your bid document together and you've got to make sure that all the grant legalese is in there as well as all the other stuff you need for your organization and making sure you have the specs of that road. And then you've got to put it out to bid and then you're hoping people bid on it. But then what if no one does? So you have to put it out more and wider and then you've got to select your vendor, however that process is according to your procurement policy, which often is lowest bid, most responsive, right? And then you've got to, time it up with them. There's just so many things involved when you are either hiring employees or hiring a big contractor to do a bulk of your grant writing work. And you can't do much until you have those people in place, right?
Fair enough. And we haven't even touched on all the other things that many of which you have done that are
Yes.
also requirements for federal and state things.
Well, way to lob me that softball. So,
I'm here for it.
so, and I feel like with financial, I feel like I flew through those. I'm gonna steal a line from my co-host here and say, today I am highly caffeinated. I've had plenty of tea this morning. So, let's talk about. So we've covered finance, we've covered programmatic, and then there's just everything else. Which this list, we could talk for days. We're just gonna highlight a couple of things, but just know it really depends on the funder all the other things that you may or may not have to do, right? So in addition to like with finance, we talked there may be financial reporting. With programmatic, there's probably some sort of monthly or quarterly report where you're reporting back to the funder of like this is what we've accomplished. Like Kimberly mentioned, success stories and failures and what we're doing moving forward. But there's a ton of other reports they could ask for, right? If it's a construction project, they're going to want those Davis-Bacon sheets, which I believe we have an episode that talks about Davis-Bacon in the past. There's you may have to meet some what's called DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise. So if you're hiring your contractor, a certain percentage of that work has to be conducted by a disadvantaged business, and so you've got to track that. There could be a lot of other monthly reports depending on the funder and the things they want to know from you. So just make sure that somebody is first of all collecting whatever information that is and is also submitting that in a timely manner. You also need to think about things like site visits from funders, right? Both private and federal organizations do site visits, whether it's a hey, we want to come check you out at the beginning, or hey, we're in the midst of things. They're allowed to do that, right? And they could come more than once. And now usually it's not unannounced by any stretch, so you've got usually some lead time, but somebody's got to do all the prep leading up to that and deal with them the day of and wrangle all the people who are supposed to be at the table. So that's something. If depending on your funder, if it's a federal funder or probably quite a few foundations, they also expect you to have annual audits. And most likely finance is handling that. But if you have grant funding involved, you're probably involved in some way. And then there is also, if you spend over $1 million, that's the current threshold as of early 2020, early to mid 2025, that it's $1 million. So if you spend more than $1 million in federal funds, you have to have a single audit. So you're probably gonna have to alert your finance department if they don't already know, like, hey, we've spent this much money. We're gonna have this extra special audit, right? So you've got to deal with all of that. Then there could be required meetings with funders. I've seen this more often with foundations in my experience, but I'm sure there's some federal agencies that do it as well, that you may be required to either one, come to some sort of in-person meeting. And oftentimes they tell you that in the RFP. So when you're writing the grant, you can build money in your budget to help pay for that if there is some sort of in-person training. But there could also be, Zoom meetings or phone calls. I have a client right now who they have to meet once a month with the funder, and all the other grantees meet for like an hour just to kind of talk about any questions, what's going on, can we help with anything, which can be really nice, but it can also be a drain on your time, but somebody's got to do it. Depending on projects, you may have some required public meetings. When I worked in local government, anytime we're spending federal funds, especially if we're doing construction projects, whether it's a road or um, a park, all kinds of things, you have to alert the public like, hey, this is a project we're doing. Come and give us your input, especially if you're in the design phase of things.
Mhm.
So that takes time and effort. I was very fortunate everywhere I worked had a community development department that was used to doing public type meetings anytime there was going to be like a zoning change or a new development. And so I would work with them. I mean, they knew what they were doing. So why am I starting from scratch? I would just be like, hey, we need to do this. I need your help. Um, and then, of course, there's all the paperwork. Anytime you're going to change any aspect of your grant, maybe you need a grant extension. Kimberly already mentioned a scope change. There could be a budget change. There could be, you know, you could have maybe your project manager. There are some grants that you've got to alert them to who like the PI is. And if that PI is going to change, you've got to alert your funder and go through the process to get your next one approved. So there's just changes to your program often require some back and forth with your funder to get approvals for things. So, anything major I've missed there, Kimberly, especially from the foundation side that you do a lot of?
I would take it back to staffing changes, and it could be, I mean, unfortunately, it's not just necessarily someone leaves. It could be that someone goes on family medical leave for an extended period of time. And for certain grants that might, if you contracted with that person, or if someone is going to step up, or you're dividing out what they were doing over the series, that can be caused. That's another aspect of grant management that I think doesn't really have a lot of light on it, but it can and does often happen because life happens.
Yeah.
Good and bad things can cause those sort of longer term absences that can affect the personnel. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I feel like I stand behind those lists. So I mean they're not exhaustive because they can't be, because this is not a 6-hour podcast. I think that would be a lot. But I guess the other thing is we can talk generally about these things, but even among federal and state programs, you're still not going to find the exact same grant management requirements across two agencies, or sometimes even within the same agency. Certainly for private funding, you're usually managing a lot less. A lot of times the awards are less, and the payment structure is very different. So it becomes more of staying in touch and communicating and connecting versus constant paperwork battles. But still, someone needs to be doing that, and that should be a part of the grant management process, even if you are focusing on private funding versus public funding. You just have to keep up with all the nuances.
Absolutely. And because no two grants really are the same, that's just one more reason that as the grant professional within your organization, you should be the one taking the lead of your grant management team. But again, you shouldn't be responsible for doing all the things. So let's talk about how you might want to put that grant management team together. And I would say I often called it my team. Sometimes you may want to call it a task force. I just wouldn't recommend calling it a committee because nobody wants to join a committee. But a task force, a team, a working group, those usually are a little bit more looked well upon, right? So Kimberly, why don't you talk about how to set up such a team if you're working for a smaller organization?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I think I like task force or team. And you may not be the in terms of the job titles, you may not be the hot leader in terms of the hierarchy, but you're going to be the leader on this.
Yes.
So that's okay, because you are the subject matter expert on this. Even if you're like, oh, but they're, I'm just getting started, and they hired you to do this. So be the expert in it and step forth in your power. And here's an idea about how to put together a grant management team or task force. That can also be task force. It's finite. You may find that the members change, particularly if you have more than one program and you are seeking different kinds of grants. But generally speaking, in smaller organizations, you would just want to make sure that there is you or someone like you who is putting together the grant management, or is overseeing, or is, even if they're like, hey, well, you're responsible for the reports, I'm like, hey, I'm responsible for the task force then, because I can't get it done without someone in a more senior financial role who can access the finances on a regular basis and someone on the program side, could be a manager, could be a director, and your title might be grant writer, it might be development director, it might be executive director. I don't know, it could be staff accountant, and you're also in charge of grant management. I feel you, but even more so, if you're coming out of finance and admin, you are really going to need to make sure that you have got buy-in from your program team and a representative who is solid and can give you that information. In terms of how this has worked for me for larger scale grants, it was when I was at a director level, then we had a director's meeting, and so those were usually weekly, and at least once or twice a month, I would be like, on the agenda, let's talk about grant X from Foundation Y. Where are we with hiring? What is going on there? Because I just would not wait. Please don't wait until, oh my gosh, the report is due in 2 weeks. I guess I better email people and ask them how it's going. Brenda, don't be doing that. Get on out there and get it done earlier. It's in the best interest of everyone, including the community that you say you are serving with this grant. Because if things are going awry, let's find out. And if you're finance director, treasurer, bookkeeper kind of person, staff accountant, like doesn't want to share any information, or your program director straight up never provides any of the documentation, isn't it better to know within a month or two, or within the first 6 months of a 2-year grant, that things are not going, so that you can either take measures, or if there's some shenanigans going on, you're in a much better position to identify that and find it out.
Absolutely.
Now, if you may not be able to meet all in person, but you can certainly meet all on the same screen.
Yep.
If you are able to meet in person, I think that's kind of easier, because there's all sorts of opportunities to read body language and see what's up. But if you are managing at a distance, that's fine too. Just call that meeting. And just as a matter, if I have retainer clients or long-term clients, whether it's grant management or grant writing, I'm meeting with them regularly, because we just don't need those big surprises. So it could be you're representing in your team the grant function itself, the grant management function itself, right? Finance and program. But I know that looks different for larger organizations. So, man, I know you're going to top in and talk about that.
Yeah. So if you've got a larger organization, it just means you probably have more people that can be involved. But a lot of the same overlap, right? So you certainly still want somebody from finance, and that could be your CFO or finance director. It could be a staff accountant. I was lucky where I worked, one of the accountants, she did other stuff too, but she handled all the grants. So it was really nice to have one person, because then we really were able to learn each other and figure out what we needed, instead of me every grant going, well, who's the accountant this on this program? So that I really liked that. But again, if you're a really, really big organization, there may be multiple people depending on the program, which one you pull into your team. You want to have your program manager, program director, whoever's running that program. And again, it could be, if it's a big program, it may be multiple people. There should be the U, which is most likely the development director or the grants director, that kind of thing. If you have other grant writers and grant people on staff, you may have another grant professional involved. And then it's a good idea if you can get some input from direct service providers, whether it's your community partners or whether it's other people that are dealing with some of the program directing. And so they may not be showing up to all the meetings, but you might be getting information from them. So kind of like Kimberly said, these folks we would meet with pretty regularly. And especially if I had some of the same teams that I worked with over and over and over again, we wouldn't necessarily have, like, I didn't have a director's team meeting like Kimberly did. And like Kimberly said, all these people on this team that I was putting together, in the org chart, I'm like way off in left field kind of by myself. So I'm nobody's boss. None of them are my boss, but I still put this team together. And we usually would, certainly meet at kickoff, but have regular check-ins. And yes, I learned the hard way that I couldn't wait for, like, hey, this grant's due tomorrow and you still haven't sent me blah, blah, blah. Like, that's especially early on in grant reporting, especially if you're working with somebody new. But what I found too is that I loved there were some program directors that were on it. And those are my favorite people. Like if I had a choice between writing a grant for them or somebody else, if I got to pick, I'm going to write the grant for them because I know grant management is going to go so much easier on everybody and the grant's going to be done well versus some of the program directors I worked with that it was like it was painful to get information that I needed. And so if I had the choice, and sometimes I did. As long as I brought in a certain amount of money and as long as major things that needed funding got funding, I was lucky that they let me kind of pick and choose what grants we went after. And so the people that made my life easier is who I like to try to work with. So,
I think you can also use the carrot and stick approach in
yes.
face-to-face meetings too, because at certain points I've either talked with the executive director or even like the board executive committee, and I'm like, if people can't spend the grants, I'm not writing the grants because
Yeah.
what is the actual point? Or in a more joking way, I've been like, oh, you don't come to me with, because the program director might be like, oh, well, there's this grant and that. I'm like, you have not spent down the money you have. I might not have been saying it to them, but I was trying to lighten it instead of going, you hadn't even spent the money you have. Can you just not sniff around me until you get it together?
Yeah.
That underlying sentiment. But that's why I'm on the team meeting bandwagon
Yeah.
100%, particularly if you're a consultant and you're grant managing as part of your product line. My goodness, you really, and it's no one is, well, that's not true. And I ripped from the headlines episodes, we do talk about people who straight up steal grant funds.
Hmm.
But most of the time, it's not criminal behavior. It's just people who are overworked and stressed out and keep putting out fires and are not able to get to where they need to get you that information.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes, a kickoff rules and responsibilities. Again, I'm gonna make the argument. If you're like, I've identified this great grant and you're starting to write it, but it does require monthly, not just monthly reimbursement reports, but it could even be monthly or quarterly extensive outcomes.
Yeah.
Extends, and not just we served 20 people. It's like, who did you serve? Where are they from? I mean, there could be a whole report.
Yeah.
And establishing that that should be, in my opinion, needs to be part of the process of whether or not your organization chooses to go after the grant in the first place.
Yes.
Don't sleep on the grant management. But at the kickoff, when everybody's feeling good, because I'm grant award, yay! Like, yay! And you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And this is when it's due because I've set it up as like either a meeting request or a task and whatever team software you're using for productivity. And if you don't have that, calendar invites could work. Don't sleep on it. I get it. You're like, oh, I'm so tired. We got this grant. It's like, if somebody's got to get hired in the first 3 months, you need to start that process now and just follow up. So it's project management is the name of the game. And how often your team meets is going to depend a lot on the complexity of the grant, the setup of your organization or your client's organization. Mm-hmm. And if you've been there for a while, you'll know you'll know whose hand you need to hold, and you know who you can just shoot an email with the form and get it back. So yeah.
Yep. And we've hinted about this, but again, especially as Kimberly says, certainly at kickoff, but it even helps as you're writing is going, sure, but let's start talking now about roles and responsibilities is that you from the outset you clearly define, because if you don't, everybody's going to be like, well, you're the grant writer, you're doing it. You're the grant manager, you're doing it. And so certainly I encourage the person leading the charge for all the things is the grant professional, but that doesn't mean we're doing all the work, right? We're doing a little more facilitation, right? So we want to make sure everybody understands what their role is, what information they're supposed to be collecting. You want to set those internal deadlines. So like I always set up, let's say my report was due on the 15th of every month. I wanted information from all my people by the 5th. So that way I have, a good week or two. Sometimes I needed a few extra days to hound them for that information. And then I've got some time to put that report together, right? And so making sure you set those deadlines and usually once people get on a pattern and a rhythm, that helps, right? and who's collecting the data and what data they're collecting. And then what information, what copies do you have to have, right? Like if, let's say you have to have sign-in sheets. So just a reminder, hey, make sure not only that you're doing the sign-in sheets, but I need a copy of it to submit to the funder, those kinds of things. And then just, again, making sure everybody understands who's spending the money, who has authority to go, nope, that's not allowed. As the grant professional, I had that overriding authority. If I saw someone was either had already charged or was trying to charge an expense to the grant that wasn't legit, I could, in our financial system, I could deny it. Or tell someone from finance, like, nope. So either we're returning this or it's being paid for out of general operating because the grant will not fund it. So we're kicking it out of here, right? So these are all the things you need to figure out. And it doesn't have to be you as a grant professional. Maybe a finance person's doing that. That's fine too. But making sure everybody understands their role and when information has to be provided so you can meet the deadline of getting your information to your funder. Because that's what ultimately I'm like, if we don't do the funder what they want, you can forget getting this grant next year, right? Which that usually was enough to convince people like, okay, yeah, we want to keep this grant and we want to get more in the future. So
Also, again, I guess this would be what would that be? TLDL, too long, didn't listen. Of course, it's coming near the end of the podcast, but if I were to recap this, it's like you need to figure out your business before the grant starts.
Yes.
Because otherwise, everybody's going to think that you're doing all of it and that you can't. I'm sure you're very capable people, cute and well accessorized. I'm not doubting your capacity for hard work and wanting to do the right thing. But my God, if you're spending all the time like actually running the program to manage the data, or you are writing or you're executing the bank transfers or writing the checks, however you would pay the vendors and contractors, you're not going to be looking for other grant funding. So there's that. And people will just assume that you're doing it all. And this is not a one person thing. It's really not to be successful. It's really not.
And chances are, even if you spell all this out and everybody knows early, and you're probably still going to get pushback. Like I said, I would make it very clear before I even wrote a grant for anybody. You do realize if this happens, you're managing the program and you're spending the money, and I'm overseeing all, the grant aspect of things. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But then when it comes to, well, Amanda, I don't have time to go get 3 quotes for this, or I don't have time. Can't you? Can't you? And again, that's when I come back going, sure, but this is what you're going to get if I do it. In a way, I'm telling them, heck no, I'm not doing that, right? And so
I just say no. You're so nice. I'm like, no, not if you want me, not if you want me to bring in money.
Yeah.
And if you're too busy for a grant, I don't need to write grants for you, right? Because it's all covered, right?
True story.
Okay.
So, yeah. So be prepared for pushback, and it's important to set boundaries and to hold firm to those boundaries. So.
And you're the facilitator. You're the project manager.
Yes.
You're the project manager, but you're not doing all the aspects of the project.
Yep.
And you can't do it without everyone doing their part. The grant, at the very least, you're not going to get the reports are not going to be there on time. So there goes a lot of carefully cultivated goodwill if you can't deliver on what you say you're going to do. Funders talk, and you can't do it without everyone doing that part. The email that has the grant report or the portal may be under your email address, but you are not the only one that makes it happen, or at least makes it a success.
Nope. And I will say too, your grant management team is a great group to share articles about grants gone wrong. That's what I used to do, is bring, like, especially if someone was complaining about, well, why are you making us do this? And I'll be like, because this organization didn't do it.
Girl, can I just, if you're not watching me, I'm listening, I'm just waving my little hands around. Making me do this.
I'm not, the funder is.
The money is coming for you to do the things. The older I get, I'm like, don't even come at me with those shenanigans. Making you do this. Yep. Why don't I just make you not have any money for your program, and then you can just do nothing? How is that? How is that going to work? I'm just saying.
I will say that, so for me, sharing articles worked, especially when I was younger in my career and people are looking at me like, does she really know what she's talking about? So having those articles helped me have a little more credibility. And I will also say that almost every single season, except for season 7, but every season of Fundraising Heyday, we have a ripped from the headlines episode that talks about grants gone wrong. And so if you, maybe one of your days, maybe you're having a lunch and learn and you're sharing an episode of the Fundraising Heyday podcast. So people go, oh, because we talk about the consequences of it. So sometimes hearing it from other people, other than you as the grant professional, is what it takes for them to really get like this is serious. Because people are, well, it's our money. No, no, it's not. It's not. So
It is not. No more than your house is really your house before you paid off the mortgage. Hi,
preach.
it belonged to the financial institution.
True story.
And your apartment, if you're renting, is owned by someone else. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Your
Yep.
car's not your car till you pay it off, got the title. Same with grants, but I'm hoping that we were able to just give you some real world, down home talking tos about the importance of developing grant management teams. And taking the time to do this will not only help you build your skills, just as a professional in general running projects. In the end, grants that are really well managed benefit the community. I mean, it really, really is the best way to move forward. And we wish you the best moving forward with a really good sound grant management team or task force, whatever name you choose.
Absolutely. Thanks again to today's sponsor, S&F Writing Solutions. If you want to learn more about all that Stacy and her team offers in terms of resources, coaching, and writing services, visit their website at snfwritingsolutions.com.
So straight up, I would never have been able to manage all the grants or write all the grants without a team approach, without trusted sources of information, financial data, program outcome data, grant management, developing those relationships, whether it's pre or post award, is literally a lifesaver, because a lot of times this funding is going to communities where it is kind of life or death if they don't get the support that they're looking for to thrive. So I'm hoping that you're inspired to use some of our framework suggestions to build a good grant management team.
True story. So we're honored you chose to spend time with us today. We hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks, where we have a guest who is beyond excited about leadership and to talk about it and to share insights. When I say she's giddy when it comes to leadership and what she's learned is probably the biggest understatement of the year. So come find out who we're talking to, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.